And the nice thing is I've got this nice drawing there that I've just covered the whole of the Rational Is Overrated pretty much as well. So 4 surprises. This first surprise is the Rational Is Overrated, going back to that. And what I mean by that is this ability to logically process information is far, far, far less than we expect. We start to tap out at adding up 4 digits, and we can stump people at multiplying 4 digits, many, many people. So we don't have a lot of conscious resources or rational resources. And the very interesting thing is that the majority of really tricky problems we don't solve in a linear way. The majority of business challenges we actually solve more with the insight phenomena, the aha phenomena. This is where Earl gets his ideas. The majority of business challenges, the answer just comes to us, okay, which is not very rational, is it? Who has big ideas in the shower, like Earl here? Does anyone have big ideas come to you in the shower? Who has them as you're exercising? Who has them as you're waking up in the morning? Who has them when you want to? Okay. Okay, a couple of people, very good. So mostly we have these sudden solutions, which are very irrational, by the way. In fact, by their very definition, they're irrational. They come from the non-conscious brain. Mark Beeman, Chicago Northwest, showed that the insights actually bubble up from the non-conscious regions of the brain and then come into awareness if the conscious brain actually allows it. The conscious brain, the rational brain, turns out to be the gate that stops insight coming through in a bunch of ways, which is quite surprising. So the rational is overrated because most of our problems are not solved that way. And we actually now know we now know the neural signature of people who are likely to have insights. So we can, Mark Beeman in Chicago says, he can put people in the scanner and very accurately predict how many insights they're going to have in his, set of 30 different insight puzzles. He can say, oh, this person looks like a 15-person, guy. This woman looks like she's going to have 20. This person, and he can fairly accurately predict just from looking at their brain scan before they start anything, before they know what the exercise is. And it comes down to basically how noisy their brain is. And how active their medial prefrontal is, so how much they're able to think about their own thinking in that way. So I put together a model for this a few years ago. I published it. It's called The 4 Faces of Insight. Sometimes I call it the ARIA model. And this is basically a summary of Mark Beeman's work and Stellan Olson and a number of the other neuroscientists that are doing insight research. And it's published in Quiet Leadership, which is... been out a few years ago. It's really unfair that I keep doing it over there, isn't it? I have to come over here. So the 4 Faces of Insight basically describes the few moments before, during, and after people have insights. And it's really important for organizational change for a specific reason. The moment of insight itself is a very, very important moment for organizational change agents for a couple of reasons. One is we've seen from studies that when people have an insight, their whole brain changes in a way that doesn't go back. You don't get that from linear problem solving. Their brain actually shifts configuration, a bit like getting a joke, a really funny joke. The second time it's not as funny because it's actually changed your brain and it's stayed. So the guy with the camera is going, I'll tell you a reason why you should be over there. There's an insight I just had from the sound of the beeping camera. Come back, they say, come back. The moment of insight packs a whole lot of energy as well. Now this is very important because change is resisted. Okay, any kind of change we non-consciously predict is going to take a lot of attention. Change computers, you're going to have to focus and have to think about things you don't currently have to think about. And we know that thinking resources, or attention resources, are limited. And so we non-consciously try to conserve our attention because our attention's limited. We've probably got a couple of hours of really good quality attention a day, so we conserve it. So we push back against change. The energy released on insight is an energy that pushes the other way. So when people have this idea themselves, they get this burst of adrenaline, burst of dopamine, and there's this push back against the normal kind of threat response. And I often say this, and I think it's very true, for about 5 or 10 minutes after someone's had a big idea, when they've suddenly had an insight about something, you can get people to promise to do something that an hour later they're going to really regret. And I actually think it's the change agent's best friend, because when people kind of make a connection, it stays in their brain, it's part of them, and they're engaged in ways that you don't see whatsoever when you just kind of tell people what to do or when they're just kind of following instructions or solving something linear. So it's a very, very important piece. But But this is, it's very, very interesting. So there's research here, but most of the research is in reflection. And for change agents, this is important because the research basically says that most of the stuff we do to try to generate insight is kind of not helping, which is very, very polite. Most of the stuff that we do doesn't help. There's a wonderful paper last year called Brainstorming is Bunk. I think it summarizes what I'm going to say pretty clearly, right? Brainstorming is bunk. And it basically showed that brainstorming decreases the likelihood of or decreases the number of creative solutions people come up with. Literally. Now, what it does do is it increases the number of solutions you come up with, but they're all along the same paths of existing solutions. So it increases iterations of existing ideas, but it reduces the actual breakthroughs, actual new ideas, people coming up with fresh thinking. And this comes back to the science now about the state of mind people have to be in to have insights. So insight requires a certain state of mind. Now, someone mentioned my blog before. See, I'm coming back. Hi. Someone mentioned my blog before. There's a blog called Your Brain at Work at Psychology Today, and there's a blog there I wrote. Most of my blogs are not sort of 800 words about the weather. They're kind of a bit meatier. But there's one called How to Have More Insights, which is a summary of all the research now about these 4 qualities. So these just look like 4 words on the page. There are actually 4 big findings about the neural state required for insight. It doesn't mean you'll get an insight, but you're going to have a lot more insights. You're far more likely to have insights in this neural state. And the basic neural state is quiet, meaning low activation of the brain, internally focused, so looking inside, slightly positive, so you're more on the towards state, and not actually trying to solve the problem. That's when we have breakthroughs. Many of you said you're involved in coaching. One of the things that I got clear on 13 years ago is when coaching works, people have had insights. When coaching works, people have seen something that they hadn't seen before and their brain has changed. The very first questions coaches ask and the very kind of strategies that coaches use don't create this, they create the opposite. Coaches generally say, tell me more about your problem, makes their brain noisy, focuses on the problem, and gets them to try to actually solve the problem. And it decreases the likelihood of insight, which is quite ironic. So when you understand the neural state of insight, you can increase your capacity to bring others to insight by a very large factor. We can get people's capacity up to 2, 3, 5, and up to 12 times more effective in a fairly short amount of training to literally your capacity to bring others to insight. So we think this is really central for organizational change. I think that organizational change happens when lots and lots of people have lots and lots of insights about how to do things differently and about how things have to change. And when people don't have insights, they're really not on board. They're really not kind of with the game, with the change that's happening. So we know lots about this. The rational is a bit overrated. We think that we just need to logically talk people into stuff, but the brain changes when we make this kind of wide scale new connection.